She didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from. All she saw was a tired man with hollow eyes, sitting alone in a corner booth, staring at a menu he couldn't afford. And in that moment, with only $8 left to her name, Sarah Mitchell made a decision that would change everything. 24 hours later, that same stranger would return, but he wouldn't be alone. What he brought with him, and the chain of events that followed, would shake a small Alabama town to its core and force an entire community to ask themselves one question: how far would you go for someone you've never met? This is the true story of a single act of kindness that spiraled into something nobody saw coming. A story about bikers, secrets, survival, and the thin line between desperation and hope. And I promise you, by the end of this, you'll never look at a stranger the same way again. Sarah Mitchell was 28 years old when her world fell apart. She worked the morning shift at a truck stop diner off Highway 65 in rural Alabama, the kind of place where the coffee was always burnt and the regulars knew your name before you wore a name tag. She'd wake up at 4:30 every morning, kiss her 6-year-old son Danny goodbye while he slept, and drive 15 miles in a car that barely started. Her second job was cleaning offices at night, 3 evenings a week, mopping floors under fluorescent lights that made her skin look gray. She wasn't living, she was surviving. And barely. The math was simple and brutal. $1,200 a month in rent for a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a landlord who didn't fix anything. Daycare cost another $300. Groceries, gas, the electric bill, her son's asthma medication. By the 3rd week of every month, she was choosing between food and keeping the lights on. This particular week, she'd already made that choice. The power company had left a disconnection notice taped to her door. 72 hours to pay $218, or they'd cut the power. She had $8 in her wallet and 2 days until payday. She'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches for 4 days straight, giving Danny the better meals, the fruit cups, the chicken nuggets. He didn't know they were broke. She made sure of that. But Sarah knew. She felt it in her bones, in the exhaustion that never lifted, in the way her hands shook sometimes when she counted change. It was a Tuesday evening, just after 6, when he walked in. The diner was nearly empty, just old Mr. Patterson nursing his decaf in the corner and a tired-looking trucker scrolling through his phone. Sarah was wiping down the counter for the 3rd time, killing time until her shift ended at 7, when the door opened and he stepped inside. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with a leather vest covered in patches she didn't recognize. His arms were sleeved in tattoos, faded and blurred with age. Gray streaked through his beard, his boots were scuffed and dusty, and he moved slowly, like every step hurt. He sat down at the far booth, the one by the window, and when Sarah walked over with a menu, she saw his eyes. They were tired. Not just physically tired, but soul-tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying weight nobody else can see. She set the menu down. He didn't touch it, just stared out the window at the parking lot where a beat-up Harley sat alone under the flickering streetlight. Sarah waited. The silence stretched. Finally he spoke, his voice rough and quiet. "Just coffee. Black." She nodded and turned to go, but something made her pause. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled slightly when he reached for the menu. Maybe it was the way he didn't meet her eyes. Or maybe it was because she recognized that look, the look of someone who was trying to hold it together and failing. She poured the coffee and brought it over. He wrapped both hands around the cup like he was trying to absorb the warmth. Sarah hesitated, then asked, "You hungry?" He shook his head. "I'm good." But he wasn't good. She could see it, the hollow cheeks, the way his jacket hung loose on his frame, the fact that he ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and still looked like he wasn't sure he could pay for it. Sarah stood there for a long moment, her mind racing. $8. That was all she had until Thursday. $8 that was supposed to buy Danny's lunch for tomorrow and maybe a gallon of milk. She thought about the disconnection notice, thought about the darkness waiting for them at home, thought about all the logical, sensible reasons to walk away. And then she thought about Danny, about the kind of man she wanted him to grow up to be, about the kind of world she wanted him to live in. She pulled the $8 out of her apron pocket, 2 5s and 3 1s folded together, and set them on the table in front of him. "Get yourself something to eat," she said quietly. He looked up at her, confusion flickering across his face. "I can't take your money." "You're not taking it. I'm giving it." She smiled, a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look like you need it more than me right now." For a moment, he just stared at the bills. Then his jaw tightened and he looked away, blinking hard. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what you just did." Sarah's shift ended 20 minutes later. She drove home in the darkness, the gaslight glowing orange on her dashboard, and tried not to think about what she'd just done. Tried not to calculate how many hours until Danny would ask for breakfast. When she got home, the apartment was dark and cold. The disconnection notice fluttered on the door. She peeled it off, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. Danny was asleep on the couch, wrapped in his favorite blanket with the dinosaurs on it, the TV playing cartoons on mute. She kissed his forehead, carried him to bed, and then sat alone in the darkness, wondering if kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The next morning, Sarah woke to her alarm at 4:30, the same as always. She made Danny breakfast, peanut butter toast and a banana, and left him with Mrs. Chen next door, who watched him before school. She drove to work with the gas needle kissing empty, praying the car would make it one more day. The diner was quiet when she arrived. She tied her apron, started the coffee, and tried to focus on the routine. But her mind kept drifting back to the man from yesterday, wondering where he was, if he'd eaten, if he was okay. She was restocking the sugar packets when she heard it. A low rumble in the distance, growing louder. At first, she thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear, the morning sun just starting to break over the pines. The rumble grew louder, closer. The windows started to vibrate. Mr. Patterson looked up from his newspaper, frowning. The cook, Luis, stuck his head out from the kitchen. "What the hell is that?" Sarah walked to the front window and froze. Motorcycles, dozens of them, maybe more, rolling into the parking lot in a thunderous wave of chrome and leather and noise. They filled every space, lined up in perfect rows, engines growling in unison, and then, one by one, they cut their engines. The silence that followed was almost louder than the noise. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Luis came up beside her. "Should I call the cops?" "I don't know," she whispered. The front door opened, and he walked in. The man from yesterday, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, a wall of leather-clad bikers filed into the diner, filling every booth, every chair. Big men and women with tattoos and scars and faces that had seen hard miles. They didn't speak, just stood there, watching her. Sarah's hands were shaking. She didn't understand what was happening. The man stepped forward, and for the first time, she saw him smile. It transformed his whole face, softened something that had been hard. "You gave me $8 yesterday," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "You didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, but you saw someone hurting and you helped." Sarah swallowed hard. "I just wanted you to eat." "I know," he said, "and that's why we're here." He gestured to the bikers behind him. "This is my family. We ride together, look out for each other, and when one of us is helped, we all feel it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, thick and heavy. He set it on the counter between them. "We took up a collection, talked to people, called in favors. There's $8,000 in there, 1,000 for every dollar you gave me." Sarah's breath caught. Her vision blurred. I can't take this." "You already did," he said gently. "You gave when you had nothing. That's rare. Rarer than you know." One of the bikers, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, stepped forward. "We also paid your electric bill. And your rent, 3 months' worth." Another one, a massive man with a beard down to his chest, added, "And we got your car fixed. New battery, oil change, tires. It's good for another 50,000 miles." Sarah's legs gave out. She grabbed the counter to keep from falling. Tears streamed down her face. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The man, whose name she still didn't know, reached out and gently took her hand. "You saved my life yesterday," he said, his voice breaking. "I was planning to end it, had it all figured out. But then you saw me, really saw me, and you gave me hope when I had none left." He squeezed her hand. "So this isn't charity. This is us paying forward what you started. Because kindness isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do." The diner erupted in applause. The bikers were smiling, some of them crying. Mr. Patterson stood up from his booth and started clapping. Luis wiped his eyes with his apron. And Sarah, for the first time in years, felt something she thought she'd lost. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt like maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cold as she'd believed. The story spread like wildfire. By that afternoon, local news vans were parked outside the diner. Reporters swarmed Sarah, shoving microphones in her face, asking her how it felt to be a hero. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt overwhelmed, exposed, like her private struggle had been ripped open for the world to see. The man, whose name she finally learned was Marcus Cole, stood beside her during the interviews. He was 54, a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Iraq. He'd lost his son Jacob 3 years ago in Afghanistan. Jacob was 22, a bright kid with a future, gone in an instant from an IED. Marcus had never recovered. He'd fallen into depression, pushed away his family, lost his job. The motorcycle club, the Iron Brotherhood, had been his only anchor, but even that hadn't been enough. The night he walked into Sarah's diner, he'd written a note, left it on his kitchen table, told his ex-wife he was sorry. He'd planned to ride his bike out to the lake, take a bottle of pills, and let the water take him. But then Sarah gave him $8, and something shifted. Not immediately, not like a switch flipping, but enough. Enough to make him pause. Enough to make him call his brothers in the club. Enough to make him want to try one more day. The bikers had rallied around him. When he told them what Sarah had done, they didn't hesitate. They pooled money, reached out to their networks, called in favors from local businesses. Within 24 hours, they'd raised $8,000 and a plan to give back. But the story didn't end there. It never does. 3 days after the bikers' visit, Sarah's life was turned upside down in ways she never expected. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Strangers showed up at the diner wanting to meet her, to shake her hand, to tell her she'd inspired them. A local church offered to cover Danny's daycare for a year. A car dealership called and said they wanted to donate a reliable vehicle, something safe for her and her son. People sent cards, letters, checks in the mail. It was overwhelming. Beautiful and terrifying all at once. But then the other side emerged. On social media, people started questioning the story. Trolls and cynics came out of the woodwork. Some claimed Sarah had staged the whole thing for attention. Others said Marcus was using her for publicity. Conspiracy theories spread that the Iron Brotherhood was a criminal organization, and this was all a cover for something darker. The worst part was the accusations about Sarah herself. Someone dug up her financial history, found out she'd filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago after her ex-husband abandoned her with debt. They posted it online, calling her irresponsible, saying she didn't deserve help, that she'd gotten herself into that mess. Sarah stopped reading the comments, stopped going online altogether, but the damage was done. She felt exposed, judged, like her worst moments were on display for the world to mock. Danny started asking questions. Why were people talking about Mommy on TV? Why did kids at school say she was famous? She didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell a 6-year-old that kindness can be complicated, that people don't always understand when you try to do the right thing. Marcus showed up at her apartment one evening, unannounced. She almost didn't open the door, but when she saw him through the peephole, something in his expression made her pause. He looked tired, sad. She let him in. They sat at her small kitchen table, the same one where she'd cried over bills a week ago. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there, his big hands folded in front of him. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of this. I never meant for it to get so big." Sarah shook her head. "It's not your fault, isn't it?" He looked at her, guilt written all over his face. "I wanted to do something good, something that would honor my son. But I didn't think about what it would do to you, how it would change your life." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You gave me hope, Marcus, you and your friends. You made me feel like I wasn't alone." Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea how long it's been since I felt that?" He squeezed her hand. They sat in silence for a while, two broken people holding on to each other in the chaos. Outside, the world kept spinning, but in that small kitchen, for just a moment, they found peace. 2 weeks later, something happened that nobody expected. The local police received an anonymous tip that one of the bikers in the Iron Brotherhood, a man named Derek Hayes, was wanted in connection with an armed robbery in Tennessee 3 years prior. The tip included photos from the diner gathering, clear shots of Derek standing with the group. Within hours, Derek was arrested. The media exploded. Headlines screamed about the criminal biker gang and questioned whether the whole charity event had been a front. Reporters camped outside Marcus's house, outside the clubhouse, outside Sarah's apartment. The narrative shifted. What had been a feel-good story about kindness became a scandal about criminals hiding behind good deeds. Sarah was devastated. She called Marcus, but he didn't answer. She tried to go to work, but the diner was swarmed with cameras. Luis told her to take some time off, that he'd cover her shifts. She stayed home with Danny, watching the news coverage, feeling like she was drowning. The Iron Brotherhood released a statement saying Derek had been a probationary member, that they hadn't known about his past, and that they fully cooperated with law enforcement, but the damage was done. People who donated money demanded refunds. The church that offered to pay for daycare quietly withdrew their offer. The car dealership never called back, and online, the trolls had a field day. Sarah became the punchline of jokes, memes circulating about the naive waitress who helped criminals. She stopped leaving the house, stopped answering the phone. Danny asked why they weren't going outside anymore, and she lied and said she wasn't feeling well. But the truth was, she was scared. Scared of the cameras, scared of the judgment, scared that she'd made a terrible mistake. Marcus finally called her a week later. His voice was hoarse, broken. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. Derek wasn't a bad guy. He made a mistake years ago, got mixed up with the wrong people. He did his time, tried to start over. We gave him a second chance because that's what we do. We're not perfect, Sarah. None of us are. He paused. But what we did for you, that was real. That was from the heart. And I won't let anyone take that away. She could hear him crying on the other end of the line. It broke something inside her. "I'm going on TV tomorrow," he said. "I'm going to tell the truth, all of it. About Jacob, about that night, about why we did what we did. And if people still want to call us criminals, fine, but they're going to know the truth first." Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. The next day, Marcus appeared on a local news program. He sat across from the anchor, a woman with a skeptical expression and a list of tough questions. But Marcus didn't flinch. He told the whole story, about losing his son, about the depression that swallowed him whole, about the night he walked into that diner with nothing left. "Sarah Mitchell didn't just give me $8, he said, his voice steady. She gave me a reason to keep going. She reminded me that there's still good in this world. And yeah, we're bikers. We're rough around the edges. Some of us have made mistakes, but that doesn't mean we're not capable of kindness." He looked directly into the camera. "If helping someone makes you a criminal, then lock me up, because I'd do it again in a heartbeat." The interview went viral. Within hours, it had millions of views. The comment section was split, some people still skeptical, others moved to tears. But something shifted. More people started speaking up, sharing their own stories of being helped by strangers, of making mistakes and getting second chances. A movement started, small at first, but growing. People began wearing bracelets with the phrase $8 printed on them, a reminder that kindness doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Local businesses started pay-it-forward programs, leaving money at registers for customers who couldn't afford their meals. The Iron Brotherhood received hundreds of emails from people thanking them, sharing their own struggles, asking how they could help. And Sarah slowly started to heal. She went back to work. The cameras eventually left. Life started to feel normal again, or at least a new version of normal. Danny asked her one night, while she was tucking him into bed, why people had been so mean. She thought about it for a long time, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes," she said, "people are scared of things they don't understand, and when someone does something kind, it makes them feel bad about themselves, so instead of looking inside, they attack the person who made them feel that way." Danny frowned. "That's dumb." Sarah laughed, a real laugh, the first one in weeks. "Yeah, baby, it is." He hugged her tight. "I think you're brave, Mommy." She held him close, breathing in the smell of his shampoo, feeling his heartbeat against hers. "I think you are too." 6 months passed. Life settled into a rhythm. Sarah was still working at the diner, but she'd started taking classes online, working toward a nursing degree. The money from the bikers had given her breathing room, time to think about the future instead of just surviving the present. Marcus stopped by regularly. He and Sarah had become friends, the kind of friendship forged in fire. They'd text each other on hard days, meet for coffee when the weight got too heavy. He'd started speaking at schools and community centers, sharing his story, encouraging people to check on their friends, to reach out when they're struggling. The Iron Brotherhood continued their charity work, now more visible and intentional. They organized toy drives for kids at Christmas, food banks for struggling families, rides to raise money for veteran support. They weren't trying to change anyone's mind about who they were. They were just trying to do good. Derek, the biker who'd been arrested, took a plea deal. He served 8 months, and when he got out, the Iron Brotherhood was there waiting for him. Marcus told Sarah that Derek was doing better, working construction, staying clean. Second chances don't always work out, but sometimes they do. Then, on a cold Tuesday in January, almost exactly 1 year after that first meeting, Sarah got a phone call. It was Marcus's ex-wife, Linda. Her voice was shaking. "It's Marcus," she said. "He passed away last night, in his sleep. His heart." Sarah's world tilted. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not." But it was. Marcus Cole, the man who'd been saved by $8, who'd turned his pain into purpose, was gone. The funeral was massive. Hundreds of bikers from across the country rode in, a procession of motorcycles stretching for miles. They lined the streets, engines rumbling in tribute, a final goodbye to one of their own. Sarah stood beside Linda and Marcus's daughter, Emily, a young woman in her 20s who Sarah had never met. They held each other as the pastor spoke about redemption and grace and the impact one life can have. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she walked to the front on shaking legs. She looked out at the sea of leather and tattoos and tear-streaked faces. "Marcus saved my life," she said, her voice breaking. "He probably didn't know it. But he did, because when I gave him those $8, I was empty. I had nothing left to give, not just money, but hope. And he gave it back to me 1,000 times over." She wiped her eyes. He taught me that broken people can still do beautiful things, that your past doesn't define your future, that one moment of kindness can change everything. She looked at the casket, draped in an American flag. So this isn't goodbye, Marcus. This is thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for reminding me what it means to be human. Thank you for showing the world that we're all worth saving. The bikers stood as one and saluted. The sound of hundreds of hands hitting chests echoed through the church. And Sarah, tears streaming down her face, knew that Marcus's story wasn't over. It would live on in every person he'd touched, every life he'd changed, every act of kindness inspired by his example. 3 weeks after the funeral, Sarah received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter and a small wooden box. She opened the letter first. The handwriting was shaky but readable. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've known for a while that my heart wasn't doing great. Doctor said it could be any day, or I could have years. Didn't matter to me either way. I made peace with it. But I needed you to know something. That night you gave me $8. I was planning to die. Had everything ready. Note written, bike gassed up, pills in my pocket. I was done. But you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth something, and it broke through the fog. I went home that night and threw the pills away. Called Linda, started therapy, joined a support group. I'm not saying I'm cured. Depression doesn't work like that. But I started fighting again. And I got 3 more years because of you. 3 years I got to watch sunrises and ride my bike and laugh with my brothers. 3 years I got to try to be the man my son would have been proud of. So thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being brave enough to give when you had nothing. The world needs more people like you. Inside the box is something I want you to have. It belonged to Jacob. He would have liked you. Keep fighting, Sarah. Keep being kind. The world's counting on it. Your friend, Marcus. Sarah opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a military dog tag on a silver chain. Engraved on it, Jacob Cole, United States Army. And underneath, a single word, courage. She put the chain around her neck and cried until she had nothing left. Today, Sarah Mitchell is 30 years old. She graduated with her nursing degree last spring and works at the local VA hospital, caring for veterans like Marcus, like Jacob. Danny is 8 now, a bright kid who volunteers with her at the community center on weekends. They run a program called $8, helping families in crisis with small acts of kindness that ripple outward. The Iron Brotherhood still rides. They honor Marcus's memory every year with a charity ride, raising thousands for suicide prevention and veteran support. Linda and Emily have become like family to Sarah. They have dinner together once a month, sharing stories about Marcus, keeping his memory alive. And sometimes, late at night, Sarah touches the dog tag around her neck and thinks about that moment in the diner, about how close she came to not giving that money, about how different her life would be if she'd walked away. She thinks about Marcus's words, "You have no idea what you just did." He was right. She didn't. None of us do. We never know what impact our kindness will have, how far it will reach, whose life it might save. But that's the point, isn't it? We do it anyway. We give when we have nothing. We help when it hurts. We choose to see each other, really see each other, in a world that makes it so easy to look away. Because maybe, just maybe, that's what saves us all. Not grand gestures or perfect plans. Just $8. Just showing up. Just being human. So now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. If you were in Sarah's position, down to your last $8 with the power about to be shut off and a hungry child at home, would you have given that money to a stranger? Be honest. Would you have walked away? Would you have justified keeping it? Or would you have taken that leap of faith? And if you were Marcus, standing on the edge of ending everything, would a small act of kindness have been enough to pull you back? Or would you have been too far gone? These aren't easy questions. There's no right answer. But they matter, because somewhere right now, someone is deciding whether to help or look away. Someone is standing on that edge, wondering if anyone cares. Someone is one small moment away from everything changing. What would you do? How would you feel if you were Sarah, watching your sacrifice become a media circus? How would you feel if you were Marcus, carrying that weight of almost giving up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. Have you ever been helped by a stranger? Have you ever been that stranger? Let's talk about it. Because these conversations matter. These stories matter. You matter. And if this story moved you, if it made you think or feel or want to be better, hit that subscribe button. Because every week, we're bringing you stories like this. Real stories, human stories, stories that remind us why we're here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember, kindness isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do.